Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in today's video, I just want to explain the difference between a piano player's path of learning versus a guitar player's path of learning. They are two entirely different perspectives. The guitar, we have this two-dimensional plane. We have notes that can move in this direction. We have notes that can move in this direction, which then offers this diagonal movement of notes. For example, this E right here on the 12th fret of the low E string is the exact same E as this on the 7th fret of the A string, which is the exact same E right here, the 2nd fret of the D string. Same exact E, same exact pitch, same exact octave. Everything about that E is exactly the same, with the exception that they are in different locations. That's the guitar. Because of this whole two-dimensional plane of movement that we have on the guitar, it's an entirely different perspective, an entirely different way of learning than that of a piano player. There's advantages to learning music theory as a guitar player, and there's advantages to learning music theory as a piano player. If you start out on the guitar and then you move to piano, you're most likely going to have a similar experience to the one I did, which is I was like, whoa, so much stuff makes sense in such a different way. This is crazy. Wow, mind blown, blah, blah, blah. Because I spent my whole life learning on a guitar. Then I went and learned on a piano from this entirely different perspective. I was like, it has all become clear now. Everything makes sense. It's so simple. Why didn't I see this before? I imagine that a piano player that started on the piano and then moved to guitar and learned the guitar player's perspective would have a similar mind-blowing experience, because it's two totally different experiences. It's two totally different perspectives. We're still dealing with the same set of 12 notes, 12 notes spanned over multiple octaves, but it's just entirely different perspectives due to the fact that this is 2D and the piano is 1D. So in this video, I just want to compare the piano player perspective to the guitar player perspective of learning music. I'm going to start this video off with the piano player's perspective, but I just wanted to say that the order that I would suggest for a piano player to learn, and this is probably going to be generally accepted across the board. Most piano players will probably be like, yeah, that sounds about right. The generally accepted order that I would suggest for a piano player would be learn your notes first, then learn shapes, and then learn intervals. It's all important. Eventually you're going to learn all of it, but that would just be the suggested order. You're going to get the furthest, the fastest if you do things in that order as a piano player. As a guitar player, on the other hand, the order is slightly different. The order that I would suggest learning as a guitar player would be shapes, intervals, notes. Again, you're eventually going to learn all of this stuff. It's all going to come together into one big, beautiful understanding, but the order is different. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. On a piano, you only have this one-dimensional plane of movement. You only have one instance of this C, or one instance of this C, or one instance of this C. There's no repeating notes on the piano. Yes, there are multiple C's on the piano, or yes, there are multiple G's on the piano, or whatever, but there's no instances of this exact C. Whereas on a guitar, the same exact note, the same exact pitch of the exact same note in the exact same octave can be found in multiple different locations. So the first thing that piano players tend to learn is a few major scales. Now there's 12 major scales in total, and usually they'll learn maybe 5 major scales on the first day. At least that's what I was taught on my first day of my piano lessons. I haven't had many piano lessons, but that's what I was taught on day 1. I was taught 5 major scales. So the C major scale is usually the first one that every piano student is ever taught. Reason being is because that's just white keys. So in order to play the C major scale, you start on any C. The C can always be found right before the 2 black keys. So there's a C right there. There's a C. So start on a C, play through the white notes until you get to the next C, and that would be your C major scale in one single octave. So usually as you do this, you also want to call out the notes, or if you're reading from a piece of sheet music, then you'll be looking at the notes and thinking about them in your mind. In one way, shape, or form, you're going to know that this is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back at C. Now, the purpose of doing this is so that you can start to play in key. The purpose of playing in key is because things just sound good when you play in key. That's not to say that, when you throw in some out-of-key notes into your in-key music, it's not going to sound good. It absolutely can. It's just that you want to have control over this. You want to be able to know when something is in key versus out of key, and you want to be conscious about when you're using out of key notes. So if I just stuck to the white keys, it's super easy to make up little songs or melody lines. I don't know, I'm literally just noodling around, and I'm just like making up little jingles, little tunes, whatever. That's how these little songs are made up, whatever. It's just that easy. Like, you make up songs that way. All right, so that noodling that I was doing right there, that's your lead. You know, that could be the lead guitar, that could be the lead singer, that could be the lead saxophone player, whatever. That's your lead section. So your rhythm section is just going to be chords, or you could even just play single notes. Like a bass player could just as easily hold down the rhythm, you know. And what single notes am I going to use? Well, I'm going to use white notes because I'm in the key of C. The lead player is also playing in the key of C. So let's say that through my noodling around on the white keys, just playing in this one single key, I come up with this little melody line that sounds something like this. Something like that. Very simple. And then I'll add a bass line here, also just using white keys. So I'm going to use an A and an F and a C and then a G. All right, so it'll be something like this. All right, so now it's starting to sound a bit like music. We have a lead section and we have a rhythm section. So now we can go ahead and add some chords. And the way that you get your chords is you just start out on any one of the 7 notes from the key that you're playing in. Right now we're playing in the key that only consists of white notes on the piano. So start out on any one of the notes and just play every other note. That's how you get your triads for the key. So starting on C, playing every other note, that's the first chord. Starting on the next note, playing every other note, that's your next chord in this key that we're in. Start on the next note. And now you're back at a C again. So you have 7 triads for the key that you're in. So knowing that that's how you determine your chords for the key that you're playing in, if I wanted to play chords along with the bass line and along with that melody that I just played, I would just play the chords that coincide with the bass notes. So the bass line was an A to an F to a C to a G. So I would do, you know, the one that starts on A, then the one that starts on an F, and the one that starts on a C, and the one that starts on a G. So if I just wanted to play the chords, now, that's one way of playing that sequence of 4 chords, but most piano players aren't going to play it like that. Like, they may play the bass line like this. They may play the bass line like that, but typically you're not going to be jumping around like this. Usually you'll try and play all the chords in like one, you know, closed location. And the reason for that is because you don't have to play chords in this exact order. Like, the bass note's taking care of this A right here. But these notes you can kind of rearrange in any way you want. You know, I could maybe keep the C and the E and then play the A up here. So here's an A minor chord. Or I could go in this direction if I wanted to. You know, maybe I'll take this E from here and play it down here. All right, so in order to do all this stuff, I need to know my notes so I can move the notes around. So I know that this chord right here consists of an A, C, and an E. So if I want to play an A, C, and an E in some other arrangement, you know, I need to know that this is a C, this is an E, and this is an A, or this is an E, this is an A, this is a C. So I really need to know my notes. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to switch around the way that I play this chord progression with my right hand. I'm going to keep the bass line the same, and it's going to sound something like this. That's probably how I would play it instead of the first way that I showed you, because typically no piano player is going to be jumping around that much. But as you can see, I'm just using the white notes on the piano. No matter which variations of the chords that I'm playing in the right hand, I'm still just using the same notes. I'm still just using white keys. The bass was just using white keys. it's pretty easy to play in this key. So this is the key of C major. This is also the key of A minor. The thing that I just played for you right there, someone may say, hey, well, that sounded kind of sad. You started on an A minor chord, you ended on an A minor chord. That's the key of A minor. And to that I would say, yeah, you're right. In my eyes, C major, A minor, it's the one that doesn't have any sharps or flats in it, okay? It's that one of the 12 possible keys. On a piano, playing in C major, A minor, it's a lot easier than playing in some of the other keys, just because you don't have to try and remember which notes are black and which notes are white and all this stuff. Things on the piano start to get a bit more complicated when you play in different keys. So you have 12 keys in total. We just looked at one of them. The next key that you're typically taught to play in as a piano player is going to be the key of G major. Why is it the key of G major? That is because that is the key that has one black note in it and 6 white notes. Let me explain how that is derived. So in order to get your major scale, we already looked at the C major scale. In order to get that major scale, there's a certain formula. It's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So if you start on the note C, and then the next note that you play is a whole step higher than it, which means that it has a key in between it. All right, whole, whole, there's a key in between it. Half, there's no key in between it. Whole, 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 half. So that's the formula for a major scale. That's how we determine this unique set of 7 notes, which on a piano just conveniently happens to be all of the white keys. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's the formula. Sounds like that. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So you take that same formula, that whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and you start out on a different starting note. You have 12 potential notes that you could start on. We started on this one. We could start on this one, this one, this one, this one. You could start on any of the 12 notes. You have 12 notes in total. Typically, the next key that we learn to play in is the one that starts on G. So you do the exact same thing. You apply the exact same formula. So start on the note G, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 because you need to have a key in between it, half. All right? So that's your G major scale. That gives you your unique set of 7 notes for that key. That's a totally different key. You can get your chords in the exact same way. Start on the first note of this new scale. Second note. Third note. You can see that we're using notes from the scale here to get this third chord here. Fourth note. Fifth note. Sixth. Seventh. And then back at the first chord. All right, so I'm in this new key now. I have this new unique set of 7 notes. I have this new unique set of 7 chords. I can create melody lines with this new set of 7 notes. I can create chord progressions. I can create bass lines. It's a completely new key. I can even play the exact same thing that I played before, but in this key now. So let's see how I might go about doing that. So what I did before was I started out on the note that is the relative minor. So before I was in the key of C major, which has the relative minor of A minor. So, now I'm in the key of G major. You can always determine what your relative minor note is by just counting up 6 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the note E. Or you can count back 3 notes. So starting on G, 1, 2, 3. So E is your relative minor. And then I can just play the same melody line starting out on the note E, using this little cluster of 5 notes here, which is exactly what I did before, but now I'm just making sure to include this note because that's part of the key, whereas this one is not part of the key. So the melody line was something like this. Something like that. And then the bass line, again, I would play the E, and then I would go down to the C, and then up to the G, and then to D. So that's the bass line. Or I could play some kind of chord progression variation, something like. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can do here. But as you can see, I'm using the notes of this new key here. It's the G major scale. It's the E minor scale. G major, E minor. This is the key that has 6 white notes in it and 1 sharp. That's the note F sharp. That's the note F. That's the note F sharp. So far we looked at 2 of the 12 total keys. We looked at the one that is just the white keys, and we looked at the one that is 6 of the white keys, and then this black key right here. And the way that that was determined is you pick one of your 12 starting notes. Once you get to there, you start over. So you only have 12 potential starting notes here, right? Pick one of the 12 starting notes, and then you play that formula, that whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You can do that with any of the 12 possible starting keys, and that's how you determine what the notes of that key are. So if I were to start on this note here, which is D, or if I were to start on this note, which is A, or start out on this note, which is E. All right, so each of these has a unique combination of 7 notes. That's how you determine your key. So the thing that connects one key to another key to another key, such that they are mathematically equivalent, is that formula. It's that whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half formula. But the thing is, you're not really going to be thinking about that formula when you're actually playing. Like if you're playing in the key of G major on the piano, or you're playing in the key of E minor on the piano, you're not really thinking whole, 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 half, blah, 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 blah. You're just thinking the notes that you're supposed to be using for this key. You just think to yourself, okay, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. All right, so I'm playing, if I play an F, that's an out of key note. I always have to be playing that F sharp note, all right? That's what I'll be thinking as a piano player. No matter what my chords are, okay, is this in key or out of key? That's in key. All right, is this in key or out of key? Yeah, that's an out of key chord because it has that F in there, you know? So I'm thinking in terms of notes, 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 notes. That's how piano players think. That's how they're trained from day one. It's notes, notes, notes. Intervals are also important to understand on the piano, but they are arguably a lot more complicated to understand on the piano than they are on the guitar. Just to show you what I mean, I'm going to demonstrate 4 different scales for you, and it's just going to be in the key that has the white keys. So this is going to be the key of C major, the key of A minor. So even playing in the easy key, when I try to explain intervals to you on the piano, you're just going to see that it's I don't know, some people may consider it to be easier, but I would assume that most people would probably think that it's more complicated. Just watch and see what I mean. So we're going to look at the C major scale. We're going to look at the A natural minor scale. We're going to look at the C major pentatonic scale. We're going to look at the A minor pentatonic scale. And we're going to look at it from the perspective of intervals, not notes. In order to look at it from the perspective of intervals, you have to start out with your major scale, but instead of assigning note names to it, you assign number names to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. All right, so to play the C major scale, the scale formula for a major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I wanted to play the major pentatonic scale, I would have to apply the scale formula, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So I play the first, second, third, fifth, and sixth note. So here's my C major pentatonic scale. That's my C major pentatonic scale. So that's all pretty easy, but let's say that I wanted to look at my natural minor scale and my minor pentatonic scale for the relative key of A minor, which also consists of just white notes. But I want to look at this from the perspective of intervals. If I want to play the A natural minor scale, I would need to apply the scale formula, which is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. That is the natural minor scale formula. So this is A. We're calling this 1. We're not calling C1 anymore. We're calling this 1. So in order to play the natural minor scale formula, I have to first know what my A major scale is, because that's the scale that every other scale is compared to. The major scale is the default scale. So my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the scale that I'm trying to determine comes from the A major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. In order to get my A natural minor scale, I have to apply the scale formula. 1, 2, flatten the third note of the A major scale. 4, 5, flatten the sixth note of the A major scale. 7, flatten the seventh note of the A major scale. So there's the third note of the A major scale, flatten that. 4, 5, there's the sixth note of the A major scale, flatten that. There's the seventh note of the A major scale, flatten that. So 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Super obvious, right? No, it's not super obvious at all. Looking at it in terms of notes, it's super obvious. It's just like, oh, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's your A minor scale. Cool, no problem, I got you. And then if I wanted to play the A minor pentatonic scale, I would do the exact same thing, but I would apply the minor pentatonic scale formula to the A major scale, because you start with the major scale for the scale in question, and then you apply the scale formula, and that's how you determine the notes. That's your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The scale formula for the minor pentatonic scale is 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. So 1, there's your third note, flatten that. 4, 5, and then the next note is a flat 7. So there's your 7, there's a flat 7. So here's your A minor pentatonic scale. That's your A minor pentatonic scale. For a piano player, it would be much more practical and effective to know that if I wanted to play my C major scale, I would play the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. If I wanted to play the C major pentatonic scale, I would play the notes C, D, E, G, A. Or if I wanted to play the A natural minor scale, I would play the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If I wanted to play the A minor pentatonic scale, I would play the notes A, C, D, E, G. Back at A again. Notes, 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 notes. That is the piano perspective. It's all about notes. Every octave is exactly the same on a piano. Learn how to play in one key here. It's going to translate to be the exact same shapes here to the exact same shapes here. But then when you want to play in a new key, it's going to be a different combination of notes. You're going to have to learn the crap out of that new key because it's different. But once you do, it's going to be the same from octave to octave to octave. So now we're going to look at the guitar player's perspective. So a typical day one guitar player is going to learn some basic open chords like the C major chord, or a G major chord, or a D major chord, or an A minor chord. Stuff like that. You know, you're not actually learning the notes. I mean, maybe you are, but the typical beginning guitar player is not learning. They learn the shape, but they're not learning that this is a G, this is a B, this is a D, this is a G. This is, you know, they're not learning these specific notes. They're just seeing this shape and they're like, oh, that's a G major chord. Okay, cool, got it. Shapes, that's how we start out. And then when you start to learn some scales and some scale patterns, again, you're learning the patterns. Again, not always. This isn't 100% of the time that applies to 100% of the guitar players. I'm just talking about the average beginner guitar playing student. We usually start to learn these scale shapes or these scale patterns. Usually the first scale pattern that you learn is the minor pentatonic scale pattern, and usually we play it right here. So it becomes the A minor pentatonic scale. So that looks like this. Again, you're not necessarily learning the notes, you're just kind of learning this pattern. You see a little fretboard diagram, your guitar teacher says, hey, play that pattern, that's your A minor pentatonic scale. In reality, this is just 5 notes. You don't know that right away. On a piano, you learn that stuff in the very beginning. On the guitar, many guitar players, they've been playing for years. They don't know that what I just played right here is just 5 notes. It was just 5 notes. No more, no less. I have an A, I have a C, I have a D, I have an E, and I have a G. Then I have an A, I have a C, I have a D, I have an E, I have a G, I have an A, I have a C. But guitar players typically start out by learning the shape first, and later on down the road, they eventually come to learn what the actual notes are. Now, the thing about the guitar is we have this whole movability thing. That is the number one benefit of the guitar. On the piano, You have to learn your notes. Every key is different from each other. But if you learn something in one octave on the piano, it's going to be the same for all octaves on the piano. That's how the piano is laid out. For the guitar, if you learn something in one key, the shape, the pattern is going to be exactly the same for all 12 keys. That is the benefit of the guitar. For example, let's play that minor pentatonic scale. If I want to play the A minor pentatonic scale, I start right here. Most guitar players learn the notes on the low E string and the A string relatively quick into their guitar journey. So if I want to play the A minor pentatonic scale, I start on the note A. What if I want to play the D minor pentatonic scale? Well, I would start on the note D right there, and then I would play that same shape. If I want to play the G minor pentatonic scale, I start out on the note G. So I played 3 different scales in 3 different keys, but they all had the same exact shape. This is something that is possible on the guitar. This is the movability of guitar that is not present on the piano. The movability on piano is from octave to octave to octave. The movability on guitar is that every single key has the exact same shapes as one another. The thing that connects all this stuff together, the glue that connects this one key being the same shape as the other key, being the same shape as the other key, is intervals. This is why I say that learning intervals on the guitar will get you further faster than learning your notes. For example, if I take this scale pattern and instead of concerning myself with knowing that this is A, C, D, E, G and learning all the notes, I could instead say that this is 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7, 1. And all I have to do is memorize that sequence of numbers one time. I know it can sound like a lot. I can know 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7, 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7, 1. That can be kind of confusing, but you just do that one time for one single key, then you have it for all 12 keys. All right? One time. You learn it by intervals. It's the same thing. 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7. 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7. So it's the same thing for all keys. So why exactly is this important? Well, let's say that I want to take this minor pentatonic scale, and I realize that the pentatonic scale is the shell for many, many other scales. And in order to get these other sounds from these other scales, like a Dorian scale sound or an Aeolian scale sound, otherwise known as a natural minor scale sound, or a Phrygian scale sound, or anything like that, or a harmonic minor, like all these scales, they produce these different sounds. I can do this stuff very easily just by knowing the scale formulas and applying the intervals. And not only that, I can do it for any key. That's the cool thing about the guitar. On the piano, I have to go and I have to learn my notes. I have to learn the different note makeup of these different scales. For guitar, if I know that, just adding in the 6, all right? You might not understand what that means yet, but a little study of intervals, you're going to see that this isn't not too far off the wall. The 6 is a whole step higher than the 5. So if I know that this is my 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7, 1 flat 3, 4, 5. So anywhere I have a 5, a whole step higher, or 2 frets higher, is going to be that 6. So I know that a minor pentatonic scale, and then I just add that 6 in there, it's going to give me that Dorian sound. Alright, so I could add that 6 in there. I can just play in any key. Say I'm jamming in the key of D minor or the key of G minor or whatever. We'll just use D minor. I know where my pentatonic shell is. I know that anytime I want to get that Dorian flavor in there, I just have to add that 6 in there. I've already learned that I've learned this shape by intervals. So here's a 5 right on the B string. There's that 6. Alright, I could do it in the key of G minor. Alright, it can be done in any key. The shape, the knowledge of intervals, adding that 6 in there, you could take this interval stuff so much further, and it's going to get you so much further, so much faster. This is just my opinion. If I had to learn all that stuff by notes, I would just have to, I would have to know my notes. I'm not saying not to learn your notes, I'm just saying that it's easier to do it by intervals. All right, so at this point, you may be wondering where the major scale fits into all this, because as a piano player, the major scale is typically the first scale that you're taught. Whereas as a guitar player, the first scale that you're taught is typically the minor pentatonic scale in position number 1, spanning 2 octaves. I know it's a little weird to do that, but that's just because of the way the notes are laid out on the guitar. The way that the notes are laid out on the guitar, it makes pentatonic position number 1, or minor pentatonic position number 1, across all 6 strings, which is 2 octaves, it makes that to be an easy shape to remember. Spanning the minor pentatonic scale across 2 octaves on a piano is not quite as obvious. 2 different instruments. But anyway, so how does the major scale fit into all this? Well, you can play the major scale in many different ways using many different patterns, just like any other scale on the guitar, or just like any other chord on the guitar. There's many different ways to play the same thing. Of course, once you learn how to do it for one single key, it's exactly the same for all 12 keys. That's the benefit of a guitar. But regarding the major scale, we can use the same little pattern right here. We can use the exact same pentatonic pattern that we've been using for the minor pentatonic scale, but we can play the major pentatonic scale. We can play the C major pentatonic scale right here. That's the major pentatonic scale in 2 octaves. This is the minor pentatonic scale, the A minor pentatonic scale in 2 octaves. All right, it shares the same notes, the same pattern. It's just which note are you dictating as the 1. So again, starting right here, putting my pinky right there, that's going to be our 1. Instead of playing just the major pentatonic notes, I'm going to go ahead and add in the additional 2 missing notes, which is the 4 and the 7. That was 1 octave of the major scale. That's the 2nd octave of the major scale, and these notes are also part of it within this little pattern as well. So you can just noodle around, and that's all I was doing right there. You noodle around in the scale. You're playing in a key, so all your noodling is going to sound good. You're going to create little melody lines and stuff like that. This is equivalent to what I was doing on the piano before. This right here, I was just playing the C major scale since I started out right here with my pinky on the note C and I played the major scale. So what I played right there was equivalent to noodling around on the white notes of the piano. Now, noodling around on the white notes of the piano, I can expand to cover the entire piano, and it's relatively easy because I learned how to do it in 1 octave on the piano, and then it's the same for all octaves on the piano. It's just the white notes. It's super, super easy to noodle around in the key of C major or A minor on the piano. On the guitar, we have this little pattern. It's not so bad, but if I want to expand and still play in the C major scale or still play in the A minor scale on the guitar, that's where things like the 5 pentatonic positions come into play. That's where the 7 3-note per string patterns come into play. There's these different visualization methods that will allow you to piece together the different patterns of one single key scale. But although that can be complicated on the guitar, although piecing together all those patterns can be complicated and you have this big matrix of notes, you only have to do it one time for one key. One single time for one single key. Learn the whole entire neck of the guitar for the key of C major, A minor, and then if you want to do it for another key, everything's just going to shift. All the shapes are going to be the same. All the patterns are going to be the same. The relationships between the shapes and patterns are going to be the same. Everything on the guitar is movable. It's one big complicated matrix of notes that you have to learn one time, and it shifts around depending on which key you're in. One other thing I want to talk about, chords and how all the chord shapes are movable and stuff like that. This is really where the Cage system shines. Again, it's all done by intervals. This is something that's possible on the guitar. So I could take this C major chord shape that I learned as a day 1 guitar player, just like this, and I could understand that this is a combination of 5 different notes, some of which are open strings. So in order to get those notes in there, if I wanted to move the shape, knowing that everything on the guitar is movable, everything, scale shapes, chord shapes, everything. One key has the exact same shapes on the guitar as all 12 keys do. Everything is movable. So if I want to take this shape and I want to move it and I want to play, say, a D major chord, I can do that. I could just move this shape up to here. So the lowest note in the C major chord, the lowest note of the chord is this note right here, C. Remember I said most guitar players typically learn their notes on the low E and the A string, but they don't always get around to learning the notes on the rest of the strings. So knowing that that's the C right there on the 3rd fret of the A string and playing that shape, I could move this whole thing up to here. But I still have to account for those 2 extra notes that were taken care of previously by the open strings. So one way to do that would be to rearrange my fingers, pretend there's a bar out there, and then just move it up to here. Now I'm playing a D major chord. It's the same shape as a C major chord, it's a D major chord now. I don't necessarily have to know the notes of this chord, I just have to know the shape. Or I could play an E major chord, or I can play an F major chord, or I can play an F sharp major chord, or I can play a G major chord, I can play any major chord. It's the same shape. So how is intervals going to take me further faster here? Well, let's start out with this D major chord shape right here. So I just need to know this shape right here, which according to the Cage system is called the C shape. And instead of looking at this as individual notes, I'm going to look at it by intervals. So this is a 1, this is a 3, this is a 5, this is a 1, this is a 3. That's going to be the same no matter where I play it. So a D major chord is equivalent to an E major chord, is equivalent to an F major chord, is equivalent to a G major chord. It doesn't matter. It's always going to be 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. So I don't need to play this chord in its entirety. I can just play the 1, 3, and the 5, and that'll still count as a major chord. So here's a D major chord right here. Or here's a D major chord here. It's all coming from this shape. So if I want to play a minor chord, I just need to take the 3 and lower it by 1/2 step, because that's what a minor chord formula is, 1 flat 3 5. So I could do something like this. There's a D minor chord. Or if I'm going to be playing the high portion of the shape, instead of playing 1, 3, 5, the 3 is up here on the high E string, just lower that to get a flat 3 in there. Any combination of 1, flat 3, and 5 will do. So here's a D minor chord. Alright, so there's little manipulations that I did to that chord shape all came from this, and then knowing where my 1, 3s, and 5s were in the shape. And of course, since everything on the guitar is movable, this can apply to any chord shape. So if I wanted to do the same thing to, say, I don't know, a G major chord, here's a G up here on the 10th fret, here's your outline of this G major chord. You don't have to play the whole thing in full. You can if you want. Here's a G major chord played in full using this C shape, according to the Cage system. But that's kind of hard to play, you know? So I might just want to play like these notes. Or I might just want to play these notes. It's all a G major chord. I'm just playing the 1, 3, and the 5. I'm not really worried about what the note names are. So again, if I wanted to turn this into a G minor chord, I just have to know where my 3 is, lower that by 1/2 step, play the 1 flat 3 and the 5. Here's a G minor chord. Or if I want to play the high portion, here's a G major chord. Here's a G minor chord. So I've given tons and tons of examples about this kind of stuff before, so I'm not going to get into a million different examples here, but the main point I want to get across is the fact that the guitar is movable in a different way than the piano is. On a piano, you learn how to play in one single key, in one single octave, and then every octave is going to be the same, but every key is going to be different. It's going to have different shapes, different notes. So as a piano player, learning the individual notes as the very first thing, that's going to get you the furthest, the fastest. As a guitar player, on the other hand, every single key is movable. If you learn all the shapes for the key of C major, it's going to be the same shapes for the key of G major, which is going to be the same shapes for the key of D major. All of the chord shapes are going to be the same. The entire guitar is just one big complicated matrix of notes, which you have to learn one single time. If you do so and you learn it one single time for one single key, the entire matrix of notes shifts around, and it's the exact same thing depending on which key you're in. So learn the matrix one time. It's hard, it's complicated, but you only have to do it once. You do it once, and then you can do it for all 12 keys, assuming you're learning it by intervals. And then go ahead and learn your notes. That's just the icing on the cake. Just like with the piano, you learn your notes, you learn your shapes, then learn your intervals. It's the icing on the cake. Learn it all, man. Learn every single thing you possibly can. I'm not saying what not to learn. I would never tell anyone what not to learn, or I would never tell anyone to not learn something. Learn everything you possibly can. I'm just saying that I think the order for which a guitar player should learn things is different than that of a piano player. So hopefully you guys like this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.